Well, I've been complaining a little bit the last little while about my bike. Well, I walk into Hardcore Bikes today, and what do they have on the showroom floor? A 2021 Ripley AF in a large. This is my 2021 Ibis Ripley AF. I just picked it up a couple of days ago, and I have been able to get out and ride it a couple of times locally, as well as take it out to a trip in the mountains. This is a really interesting bike for me. My experience with suspension is limited to like the worst quality spring or like coil forks. Every bike I've ever owned in my whole life has been a hardtail. This is my first full suspension bike. And I guess, you know, if you're sort of in a similar situation where you're making that transition from a hardtail to a full suspension bike, you probably have all of these expectations about what that's gonna be and how magical it's gonna be, because you've just been drinking all of this YouTube Kool-Aid and advertising Kool-Aid for so many years, lusting after these bikes. But I came from a place thinking, you know, like I'm riding a hardtail and I'm just like charging like crazy through chunk. 120 mils is gonna be like a mind-blowing experience. And the truth is, it's still only 120 mils. You know, if you're not gonna get a magic carpet out of 120 mils. But as somebody who is coming from a hardtail their whole life to their first full suspension bike, this bike is an amazing bike for people who are coming from a short travel XC situation. I think it's even me, a bike that's 5 years old or 6 years old, the Geo feels very similar. The DW Link, you sit up pretty high in the travel. Like I'm saying, I'm running 26% sag on this. This is 2 degrees slacker with a longer wheelbase than my bike. And I feel like it handles very, very similarly. I grew up riding hardtails and I've learned to cope with no travel. So when you do get that 120 mils of travel, if you have a similar skill set and you've adapted to find ways to smooth out the trail to make your life a little bit easier out there, all of those techniques are still really relevant to riding something like this, and then you just get to have more fun. You know, there were a couple of cases that I had when I was in Canmore riding at the Nordic Center. They would have murdered me on my hardtail. I would have crashed for sure. And it gives you that level of forgiveness that you just don't have on the hardtails. I think if you want something that's familiar, that's gonna be really easy to hop on and just pedal and go. If you are coming from an XC bike and you're looking for your first trail bike or your first full suspension bike, dude, yes, please. And I think in Edmonton, this bike is gonna fare very, very well, where you have the undulating trails. The up and the down is where something like this is really gonna shine. And I mean, if you are racing though, definitely something lighter weight, this is not the bike for you if you wanna race XC bikes. But it's a great bike if you just wanna shred your local trail. And put in some miles, because it is a really efficient pedaler. You just have to acknowledge that there's a bit of a weight penalty. But for the price point, every bike in this price category has a weight penalty. Like, you're not getting a $4,000 bike that doesn't weigh a lot. And to be fair, if you own this bike for years, you're gonna be able to make modifications to the build kit to shave grams where you can. This is the Dior build. I'm pretty happy with this in general. There's a few things that I have gripes with, specifically the brakes. They have a bit of a floating bite point, and it hadn't occurred to me when I bought the bike that was gonna be an issue that I was gonna have. And then when I was in the mountains, I really started to notice it. I didn't get any brake fade when I was in the mountains that I really noticed. Not like, again, I'm not riding the steepest, gnarliest stuff. It's a 120, 130 bike. Bike travel aside, I'm not riding that stuff. That's just not the rider that I am yet. So I didn't notice any brake fade, but I definitely noticed that when you're off the brakes for a while and you come back to them, you're pulling all the way to the bar. In reality, they're 2-pot brakes anyway. I 100% want to put 4 pots on this. That kind of reflects more what my ambitions are as a rider. And so if I'm gonna be changing those brakes out anyway, you know, I kind of don't care quite so much. The nice thing is though, these rotors at least take metallic pads, so that saves you a little bit of money having to upgrade those rotors to something that'll do that if you need the extra stopping power out of the brakes that you do have. I already know after taking this to the mountains, I do want to put a 140 fork in here. I'm also hoping that by slackening the bike out by a half a degree with that extra 10 mil in the front, that's gonna make the bike a little bit more agreeable for leaning. You still have to use a little bit of hand steer where I would prefer to just lean the bike more. And I'm not entirely sure. Part of that could be my personal ability level. Part of that could very much just be the geo of this bike. because it is kind of like that XC rider's trail bike, I guess, you know, like that's kind of what this is. I don't want to say, don't make me say it. I'm not going to say it. Yeah, the only other spec thing that I need to personally evaluate is our dropper post. I have an extra 25 mil. I don't know what the insertion depth is, so I have to look that up. But if it can accommodate a 175, I would love to go to a 175 because I definitely have space for one. The final gripe that I have with this that I feel does bear mentioning, I was told there would be room for a large water bottle. That's generous. I might need a different cage that has a deeper bottom or that I can mount lower on this thing, but my water bottle definitely hits up against the shock and kind of sits out the side a little bit. It's definitely a suboptimal fit. But again, I do have a 750 ml water bottle, so it is quite large. But you know, honestly, I don't have much to complain about. My biggest complaint is that maybe this isn't the best bike for me. Honestly, this is gonna be a great bike for riding in town, but my ambitions are getting bigger and bigger as far as the kinds of technical terrain that I wanna be riding, and the kinds of bikes then that I also wanna be riding. I mean, again, first full suspension bike, but this is why I'm already starting to think that there's no such thing as a quiver killer. Because I love pedaling. I really like to pedal. I like to ride XC trails. I like to just ramp my heart rate up and keep it pinned. I treat so many of my rides like it's a race because I just have that personality. And that's how I love to ride. I'll ride 30 kilometers, you find recovery where you can, and the rest of it you're pinned. Like, I just love riding like that. And this is gonna be a good bike for that riding style. But that riding style doesn't apply when you go to the mountains. That riding style doesn't apply when you're pointing the bike downhill. Your value system as a whole changes when you get into that situation. And if you try to, it's like, you know, the jack of all trades, master of none. We have to recognize that you're not going to get the perfect bike in one bike, unless you're riding very limited trails. If you always ride the same style of trail, then that's not true. Like, you know, you can definitely get away with riding the same bike. But if you have ambitions to explore more disciplines, unfortunately, every discipline sort of comes with its own bike. You're not going to win road races riding your XC bike. I've heard it a lot that there are no bad bikes. Every bike is great. And that's true. But not every bike is right for you. Maybe that's obvious, but as my style has changed and as I've progressed as a rider, I think I still kind of hold on to some of the original views that I had 2 years ago about how I value XC riding and about what kind of bike I want, and about, you know, I was very opinionated about short travel and how it was the best, even though I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. But you know, I developed these opinions that I'm now able to put to the test. And I'm realizing that I wasn't right. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, make sure when you buy a bike that you take a long, hard look at what you really want out of the bike. Don't listen to what YouTube is saying. Like, really due diligence, understand what you want out of your travel. Don't define yourself as an XC rider or as an all mountain rider or as a trail rider. Just figure out what you want your bike to be able to do and get the bike that can do those things. This bike ended up introducing more questions to me about bikes as a newcomer to full suspension than it answered. You know, if I spent the same amount or a similar amount on a bigger travel bike, do you end up with the same weight penalties? How do the suspension kinematics change when you move away from an incredible pedaling platform like the DW Link? There's just, getting into a full suspension bike, and this bike in particular, has just like expanded my world in a way that I never expected it would. But it's also done it in a horrible way because now I just want more bikes. Like this, yeah, this is a great bike, I think, for the city that I live in, where I do a lot of my riding, but more and more I want to be out of town on the weekends. I don't want to be staying here. Would I buy this bike again? No. Flatly, no, I would not. But this is not a long-term review, right? So we have to remember that my opinion may very well change. And as I continue to modify this bike and dial it in a little bit more, I may have a greater sense of attachment to it. But for the time being, would I spend the money again? No, I wouldn't.
I would get something bigger travel. I am not afraid of more travel. And I was for a long time. I was really afraid of additional travel. I thought it was unnecessary and foolish. And I got so comfortable on my hardtail that I was like, I can ride this easily on my hardtail, so why do you need 150 mils of travel in the back? Well, it's just because it gives you more options. I think if you only ever ride undulating trails, this is the only bike you need. But that's not what I want to ride. I want to ride everything. I want to ride tech, I want to ride bike park, I want to really dig deeper into what the world of mountain biking is and to push my limits as a rider and as a human. With these bikes, you're always balancing something. You gain something, you give up something every step of the way. You gain pedaling efficiency, you lose travel. You gain travel, you lose pedaling efficiency. You gain travel, you gain weight. There's all of these different balances. So keep that concept in mind. If this is your first full suspension bike and you have this impression that it is going to be a magic pill, because it's not, but it is a hell of a lot of fun. What bike would I look to if I was going to buy a bike again? I would probably look to 150 in the rear and maybe even more up front, but I would want a really efficient pedaler. We do have a lot of tight switchbacks around here, so I would also want something that's, not quite the longest wheelbase of all time, but I could easily go 50 mil up on this wheelbase and be pretty content. At the end of the day, I'm still happy to have a full suspension bike and to have this full suspension bike in my garage. It's not the perfect bike, but I would argue that no bike is. And so at a certain point, it's like any relationship, right? Like, oh my God, nobody is perfect. So just get to know it. I gotta spend more time. This is very much like a first look, my first impressions. I really want more time on the bike. There's a lot of new things to learn, and I am grateful to this bike for teaching me that. I definitely want a bigger bike, and I'm looking forward to the day that I can bring you another new bike day review.